Welcome back to Following Noadon, a Stormlight podcast. This week, we have come to the end of part 2 of Words of Radiance, chapters 31 through 34, and what a couple of chapters we had to close out this section. I want Paul's reaction first, because Paul's been waiting for so long for more Szeth content, and he was hoping that he would get some in the interludes, but little did he know he was actually getting it literally 2 chapters later. So here we are. We have Szeth content, and it's some pretty cool Szeth content. How we feeling, Paul?
We're feeling absolutely outstanding. I will just say that I will tell a short story. Whenever I listen to the audiobook of this, I'm usually doing something, either driving, oftentimes like doing dishes or laundry or something like that. And whenever Kaladin and everyone is going, and then it describes Szeth, very obviously, like Assassin in White, Shin Man, I just stopped what I was doing and just tried to take it all in.
Right.
And it was awesome. It was outstanding. I loved every moment of it.
I'm now imagining you pulled over on the side of the road, just like entranced by this part,
gripping your steering wheel, like the assassin in white is here.
The officer comes up to the window. Excuse me, sir. What are you doing here? Hold on, we're at the part. We're at the Szeth part.
Yeah. Fair.
That's how I see this happening, Paul.
It was great.
Elliot, how are you feeling?
Oh my. It gets real tonight, boys. It gets real. I did not think that we were going to be getting to quite some momentous events as this until much, much later in this book. So to have some big stuff happening now at the end of part 2, I was actually trying to calculate roughly a third of the way through the book right now. To have us getting to this kind of stuff now is surprising and a welcome surprise. I'm all in now.
All right. Dare I ask you guys for 2 words to try to summarize these 4 chapters? Elliot, you can go first.
I could not even get past my first reaction to these chapters, so my 2 words for these chapters are, oh my.
Okay. Paul?
Oh, man. My 2 words were realization and desperation. I also spent a solid all of Elliot's talking time trying to figure out what I wrote because I couldn't read my own handwriting.
Nice.
I thought desperation was like differentiation or something. So, but yeah. It's desperation, I found out.
And what was your second one? Desperation and
realization.
And oh my. Let's discuss these words. All right, Elliot. What does oh my mean?
I feel like oh my might be a little self-explanatory, but instead of talking about plot and characters here, I'll talking about pacing of the novel. So last episode we talked about the false summit of Kaladin and Shallan finally meeting. We thought that was going to be such a big important moment. Turns out it wasn't. Shallan just stole Kaladin's boots, and that was it. That lulled me into a false sense of security. I thought that was the psych out of, here's your climax. Oh, nope, just kidding. It's not going to actually be that important. You're not going to get it for a while. So for the craziness to start happening 3 chapters later caught me completely off guard. And so when Szeth showed up, even down to the point where they're rushing to try and get Elokar out, I'm like, No, it can't. No, it can't be. It can't. Szeth is here. What? Like, oh my! I can't give you more words than "oh my" to try and describe how I felt during these chapters.
Some quality first time reaction. Paul, talk to me about your 2 words.
So my 2 words, first of which being realization, was for the Szeth and Kaladin fight, but mostly after the fact. So we see Szeth kind of have a big awakening or realization about some things, which I'll dive into more later. It kind of takes off with that news, and also I put realization because I think Kaladin finally sees what he's up against for the most part, or all of them do. All the Alethi men there, Dalinar and them.
Adolin has an interesting realization of getting
Yes,
a nice whooping.
Yeah, and they're like, "Whoa!" Like we thought we were just the best, and we kind of got it handed to us. So they have a big, maybe more of a rude awakening there. And then desperation is for the Shallan chapter, which I'm super excited to talk about. And yeah, mostly just that her desperation drove her to. Well, I'm very excited about the I've been looking forward to for a long. This I didn't expect both. So I'm referring to Shallan finally drawing her shard blade.
Uh-huh.
And
Oh my!
I did not expect that to happen in the same episode as the Szeth Kaladin first moment. So I'm kind of beside myself here. I'll be honest.
Uh-huh.
I don't. If I get up and leave in the middle of the episode, just know I'm
Processing.
crying or like yeah. I'm thinking very hard. I need to go I don't know. I just need some time to myself after this week.
All right.
Gotta recover.
So chapter 31 doesn't ramp it up quite yet. We have a chapter between Kaladin and one of the bridgemen. I don't remember what bridge he was on. 17 maybe. They say 17 a lot. Maybe I think it's 17. And he's seeing good development between the bridgemen and their new bodyguards. So we can talk about this for a little bit to kind of warm up to our next 3 chapters. Anyone want to talk about our, dare I say, boring in comparison chapter?
I did think there was a great little quote in the beginning of this chapter, which was a little strange because the first few pages were Kaladin, and then it moves on to Shallan, which kind of threw me a little bit. But in that Kaladin chapter, he's talking to this other bridgeman. His name is Pitt, and this guy Pitt, he says, turns out men can be reforged. And I just thought that was cool. I thought that was a cool metaphor there for what exactly Kaladin is doing with these bridgemen. And we saw it all the way through Way of Kings, right? That was a huge bit of Kaladin's journey of picking these men up from the lowest possible point they could be and showing them that they can be men again. They can matter. And here we're seeing this happen a little bit again because the men of Bridge 4, they've already come out of the abyss, if you will. This guy is now just experiencing that for the first time and realizing that, oh, I have to go back to my bridge crew and do this for them. I have to be Kaladin for them. And it's a cool little moment to remind you what these guys have been through and what some of them still have to go through. So this metaphor of reforging them into a new blade or a new weapon and rebuilding them I thought it was cool.
And Shallan's also doing something similar, or trying to, with Gaz and Vatha and her deserters turned hired soldiers. So Shallan has finally made it to the Shattered Plains with Tin. It only took us 30 chapters, but we are here. She stands up and she can see smoke to the north, I believe. they're traveling north, and she sees smoke off in the distance, and they decide to camp for the night because there's a high storm coming. So they want to be nice and fresh in the morning when they show up. So they, I don't know, they camp a couple hours away from the war camps, and Shalon or Tin kind of uses information with Shalon as kind of like an appetizer. She kind of chides Shalon's like, "Oh, did you know half of the royalty in your homeland is dead?" And Shalon's like, "What?" And Tin uses it to like gauge her reaction to see how much she knows. And Shalon realizes that and says, "Oh, Tin uses information a lot like Yasna would use her poise. She uses it as like a leverage in conversation to like Yasna would assume that people would do for her what she would expect because she has this power illusion going on that she kind of explained to Shalon, and Tin is using this information to control the conversation, and Shalon is kind of learning how to do that from Tin. And she mentioned something that she has a span read in Yakoved, and she's got a lot of information, and we'll talk about it later tonight, which is chapter 34 when they have an interesting interaction, but we'll get to that later.
I note here that this is the nail in the coffin, that Tin does not have Shalon's best interests at heart. If Tin cared at all about Shalon, this is information she would share with her, immediately. But the fact that she withholds it and uses it to manipulate and kind of test Shalon and control, like you said, Trevor, the conversation, the way it goes, clearly shows you that Tin does not care about Shalon at all.
Any other thoughts from chapter 31?
When does chapter 32 start?
Right now? Okay.
Right now.
Let's go.
So, from probably part 2, part 3 of The Way of Kings, we've been wondering, when does the Kaladin and Szeth showdown happen? We've been asking, as soon as Kaladin started showing these surge binding powers that we know Szeth has, we're like, all right, when's it happening? When's it happening? Here's our first one. Kaladin gets a vision from the Stormfather as the high storm hits, similar to what Dalinar has. And Kaladin's actually had this before, but not to the consistency that Dalinar has. Dalinar has them every high storm, at the beginning of every high storm. They're so much so that they schedule it. Navani goes and records what Dalinar says. They're learning. And it's so consistent that they know what's going to happen. Kaladin, this has only happened to him twice, maybe 3 times, because he was out in the high storm that one time and saw the Stormfather. One time later, he was riding the high storm in a dream, and he finds Szeth. And Eliot, we had that video of you pointing all across the map and trying to figure out where Szeth was. Turns out it wasn't important.
Oh well.
But now
we know where he is now.
Yes, now we get another vision before the action starts here of the Stormfather talking to Kaladin, and he says a couple interesting words. Did either of you guys pick up on this short conversation?
I highlighted all of this section, the discussion, the dialogue between the Stormfather and Kaladin, because I feel like this is another instance where I feel like there's so much here that I only understand a small part of. But I keyed in on the fact that the Stormfather calls Kaladin the Son of Honor, which could perhaps be tied into the fact that, like, Kaladin has an honor sprint, and we know that Windrunners are very tied into honor, and so perhaps it's maybe reference to that, the fact that he's a Windrunner. But we also know, or at least we've kind of pieced together at this point, that the Almighty is also called honor, right? That's his name or a reference to him. And so
Right.
that puts this little title in a really strange light. Son of Honor? How is Kaladin the son of honor if that's what this is a reference to, which is super strange.
So
Is that what you were? Go ahead, Paul.
There's more, but
I was just
I'm
gonna
waiting.
say, I was gonna say, like, the most notable thing for me with this was, if I remember right, the Stormfather. If we're assuming, either way, the Stormfather keeps talking about like he's gonna get Syl killed,
Yeah.
kind of thing, and I thought that was weird, and also makes sense. It makes sense because from what we know about the Spren, they can come to a person like this, but that's very unnatural almost, like maybe frowned upon. I don't know. It just doesn't really happen. And this may show why. I don't know what the risk involved in is truly is, or how you even kill a Spren. But
I'll
Stormfather probably knows more about it than I do.
I'll take this one step further. It's not that Kaladin will get Syl killed, it's that Kaladin will kill Syl. It's a very aggressive action that the Stormfather is accusing Kaladin of. He's not saying she will die. He's saying you will kill her. Any thoughts?
A couple. None of them really make any sense, but you know.
So Pattern and Shallan had a similar conversation not too long ago, right? Where Shallan kind of drug out of Pattern, what were you about to say? What were you actually going to say? And Pattern has to admit that he believes Shallan is going to kill him. And Shallan kind of says, "No, I would never do that. Why would you think that?" And Pattern just kind of alludes to some sort of like betrayal of the Spren, and Syl's made reference to this a bit before in the past, like the betrayal of the Knights Radiant, and we don't know for sure exactly how that works or what happened and all this, but this seems to be another reference there to where I guess Spren and the Stormfather just have no faith in humans, that they're not gonna betray at some point, that they're not gonna hold up their end of the bargain somehow, that somehow they're gonna break their bond maybe with their Spren. And it almost seems like, thinking the Stormfather even talks about it here of Kaladin's like, why would I do that? And he's like, you've started already. You don't even realize you're doing it. It's not even something you're gonna do intentionally or not necessarily maliciously. It's just something you're going to Syl's gonna become. I'm kind of getting the impression that they think Syl's gonna become collateral damage in something that's gonna happen here. But yeah, I'm kind of with you, Paul. Most of my thoughts on this are still kind of non-coherent, just because I feel like we don't quite have enough. I feel like there's something bigger here that we don't quite get. That we need a few more pieces to put together the rest of this puzzle.
And then we don't get any time to think about it because Szeth's here. So let's let's push forward a little bit. And the Stormfather actually warns Kaladin of Szeth, if I remember correctly. He says he comes or something like that.
So let me pause you there actually for a second, because I had a thought on that. He says that, you're absolutely right. He says that he comes, but at the end of that vision, Kaladin describes another storm that he sees, and the storm is described as red. And when he said he comes, I couldn't decide whether the Stormfather was trying to tell him about Szeth being there, or if he's talking more about like odium coming and the bigger picture desolation that's coming down the road. Was Kaladin getting a hint of that, and that's what the Stormfather's talking about, or is it literally like oh, hey man, by the way, you should wake up now because there's an assassin outside the door. I wasn't sure which one he's warning him about.
I think on that it was about Szeth somehow, but I would believe both. Like I would believe that it's a warning for both. Um, but yeah, and also with the red storm, we've been alluded to this a bit now, or not even just alluded, like it's been mentioned several times, and Sale even mentions seeing like these spren like red lightning that she does not like at all.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think that that's tied with Szeth because after the fight, I believe Szeth and Kaladin, Kaladin and Syl talk about it's and like, oh, does he have an honor spren? And Syl's like, no, he has no spren, or at least no right spren, I guess. So it makes me think that it's some kind of evil spren. That's with Szeth. Either that or it's something else that we don't know about that lets him surge bind. So that's one of my biggest questions. But yeah, that kind of skips to after the fight. But
We'll get there.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to read some of the setup here for this fight, but we're not quite there yet. Kaladin is freaking out. He opens the door out onto the balcony, and Adolin's like, what the heck are you doing? There's a high storm going on. And Syl like comes zipping out of the darkness and is like, yo, something's really wrong. And Kaladin's like, yeah, I know. And he walks in he barges back through the door, goes into Dalinar and says, yo, we need to move. We need to go now. And he's thinking to himself, do I go to the war camps? Where are we going exactly? I don't know, but we just need to move. And Dalinar and Elhokar have two very interesting reactions to Kaladin's fight or flight here. And Elhokar seems really annoyed. He's like, why are we... why on earth are we leaving? This is the safest place in the world. And Dalinar says, okay, we're leaving. I will trust your instinct, because that's what Kaladin says to Dalinar, that that's why they're moving. And Dalinar says, okay, I'll expect an explanation later, but I'm not going to ask right now. We're moving. It was definitely Dalinar's word that got them all moving, and not Elhokar's. And they're all there to protect Elhokar. What are your guys' impressions of that?
I think it has to do with the fact that Dalinar is a soldier. At least that's how he thinks. And so he trusts Kaladin. Kaladin has saved his life on the battlefield. And so when Dalinar sees Kaladin urgently saying, yo, we got to move, we're in danger, Dalinar's soldier brain kicks in and is like, okay, let's do it. Let's go. I trust you. Let's do this. Let's survive. Whereas Elhokar, as we've seen before, is kind of more the like spoiled brat kind of character. He's got some military prowess. We've seen him on the battlefield before in his shard blade, his shard plate, but he doesn't think like that. He doesn't think like a soldier. He thinks more of like a noble who's never had to, make it through some sort of crisis like that. And so he's a few steps behind. He's still kind of in what? Why would I walk out of this room? It's raining out there kind of thing. Whereas Dalinar recognizes crisis, reaction, let's go, let's do this.
It's definitely been apparent that Dalinar is in charge.
Yeah.
Elhokar is the figurehead for the most part. And I feel like that's just about all there is to it. People listen to Dalinar, they know he knows what's going on and everything. And I even think it's really cool with Dalinar in this whole scenario, whenever Szeth does like appear, it specifically mentions that the Blackthorn like comes out. And the Blackthorn is the one who's like fighting there. I thought that was a really sick distinction because we definitely know we've talked about how there's kind of like two sides to Dalinar almost. There's like the Blackthorn, and then there's I don't know what to call the other side. Almost like a Mr. Rogers.
The
I feel
philosopher.
like yeah.
The know-it-on side.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're escaping down through the kitchens, if the long dark tunnels underneath the pinnacle here, and I just want to read some of this scene because I've established this before, and we've seen it in The Way of Kings, that Brandon Sanderson is really good at payoff. There's a lot of setup here. We know that Szeth has been coming. We know that Kaladin has some Stormlight abilities. Adolin is a really good fighter. And here's some of our payoff. Kaladin, frozen place. The lights ahead went out, the corridor dimming into the distance until it was as dark as a mine. Wait, Adolin said, stopping in place. Why is it dark? What happened to the spheres? They'd been drained of light. Damnation. And what was that on the wall, on the hallway up ahead? A large patch of blackness. Kaladin frantically fished a sphere from his pouch and raised it. It was a hole. A doorway had been cut into the corridor from the outside, sliced directly through the rock. A cold breeze blew inward. Kaladin's light also illuminated something on the floor just ahead. A body, lying where corridors crossed. It wore a blue uniform. Belled, one of the men Kaladin had sent ahead. The huddle of people stared at the body in horror. The corridor's eerie silence, the lack of lights, had stilled even the king's protests. He's here, Syl whispered. A solemn figure stepped out of the side corridor, holding a long silvery blade that cut a trail in the stone floor. I love that passage. When I listen to it or read it on my read-throughs, I'm like, yes, Szeth is here, let's go.
That's exactly how I was that I mentioned before. Whenever it described that, I was like, oh no, like chills and everything. Like, oh, it's finally time. And the fight that we talked about it before with all the Szeth interludes before where he's killing people and with the later Way of Kings chapters with the fights. The imagery is incredible in the writing, and it definitely did not disappoint in this. I felt like the fight was super exciting, and I loved how it always had me thinking that Kaladin was going to have the upper hand, not the upper hand, but do some damage. Like he was gonna, really injure Szeth or, somehow come out on top, which didn't really happen, but it did showcase, like I said, the realization with Kaladin realizing I'm doing everything I can, and I still can't quite like catch him. He was always at least a step ahead, and
it's even described as Kaladin's training let him down, where the move that he's doing would have worked against a normal spearman, a normal soldier, but he spins and does this parry with his spear. But Szeth has a shard blade. The shard blade just goes straight through the spear and slices straight through Kaladin's arm, and that like his training just let him down. He doesn't know how to fight a shard bearer. He's trained all his life against normal soldiers, and because of that, his instincts led him to get his arm sliced.
I think that Swordmaster guy,
Zahel,
he's saying "I told you so" right
about now.
Remember they had a conversation where he was like, "Hey man, you need to learn how to fight shard bearers." Cal's like, "No, I don't need to learn how to fight shard bearers." Yep, told you so. This scene, more than anything else we've seen before Szeth, cements in my mind just how incredible Szeth is. Like, we've seen him take on multiple shard bearers before. We've seen him take on a whole army of soldiers in Yakovet, I think it was. But here we have the three most impressive warriors we've seen so far in this story. We have Adolin, the master duelist who no one can beat. We have Dalinar the Blackthorn, who just wins. And then you have Kaladin, who is a Surge Binder, he hasn't been trained to fight a Shard Blade, but he's been training to use his abilities. We've seen what Kaladin can do. All three of them just get owned by Szeth in a matter of like seconds. It's not even a competition. He just outclasses them by a mile. I was impressed with Szeth before. Now I'm even more impressed with Szeth.
I will say I was expecting a little more of a stroll. It definitely pointed out that this was not like this. It seemed like the most difficulties had with his job, right, to assassinate whoever. Because I mean, they're definitely better than the other people he's kind of murdered, but yeah, he definitely stands head and shoulders above. Yeah, kind of.
We're just sweeping that under the rug. That's murdered a couple people.
One or two. Yeah, he definitely stands head and shoulders above the rest in this combat, but he doesn't succeed. No one else really dies, I guess.
Besides Beld.
Yes, R.I.P. Beld.
One of my favorite moments of this 3v1 is how irrelevant Adolin is. Szeth walks in and lashes Adolin to the roof almost immediately, and Adolin is like, What do I do against that? I'm standing on the roof, upside down, saying, "Father, help!" I'm standing on the roof, and he is he's just so outclassed, and he's never been like that before. He mentions that later, how soundly they get routed, and honestly, it might be a good wake-up call for Adolin of, no, he's not the best duelist around. Szeth is, and you need to work harder.
To be fair, I don't know what you do. Like you said, like what do you do? Like I guess you're stuck looking up or down or something like that, and just like go team, like
right.
Guess I'm a cheerleader now. Like
it's definitely unfair that Szeth not only is a Surge Binder, but is a very practiced Surge Binder. I think Syl even and Kaladin talk about this a little bit. It's not even necessarily, although he may be, it's not necessarily that he has more powers than Kaladin. It's that he knows how to use them. It's that he's been killing people, his Surge Binding abilities for years and years, at least 6 years, if not probably quite a bit more.
Right.
So Adolin, no matter how skilled he is, when you pit him against the very experienced Surge Binder Szeth, it's never going to be a competition.
I could be remembering this wrong, but in previous Szeth, what do you call them? Jobs, assassinations. Aren't there times that he just he doesn't use his shard blade, and it talks about how he's the real weapon?
Yep.
Not shard blade. And doesn't he start this fight without his shard blade, but then pull it out later? Kind of like I think I might need this after all.
No, he walks around the corner with the blade because it's cutting a slice in the rock as he walks around the corner.
He starts out by kind of fighting with his Surge Binder abilities, which we've seen him do before, right? His kind of first thing is, I'm going to put Adolin on the roof, and I'm going to, punch Dalinar in the face or whatever he does. But he has a shard blade. But you're right, he doesn't necessarily come leading in with that as the primary weapon. He's going to control the fight first, and then he's going to use the blade to finish him off.
Okay,
which he does to Kaladin's arm. He manages to not take Kaladin out completely, but goes right through his arm, which was intense. I thought he was going to lose that arm.
I thought so too. I was like, whoa. Like, where does he go from here? Like,
Yeah.
you know.
We have a couple
But-
revelations in these sections of chapters, and here's the first one. Dalinar catches Szeth's Shardblade. And I remember when I read this first, I didn't really understand what was happening here. I thought it was just some weird fluke in the magic system that I didn't know. But no, what's actually happening is Szeth is doing an overhead strike, and Dalinar is clapping his hands together and catching the flat of the blade. And I didn't catch that my first read through, and it made sense to me later. I was like, oh, that's what's happening. But that's quite the ballsy move to be on your knees and about to die and have the clairvoyance to catch a blade.
I guess you kind of have to go for it, you know?
Right.
You know?
You're going to die if you don't get it.
Don't have many options. So, but yeah, that was very impressive.
It was some Kung Fu master level move right there. Of can you imagine
chopsticks? You know, like
right? Yeah, the not only the timing you'd have to catch that blade as Szeth is swinging, but also the strength to you're not pushing back against him. Now you've caught it, but now you have to like hold it back from slicing you in half by just pinching it between your two palms. So very impressive move there by Dalinar.
And it buys him a second for Kaladin to tackle Szeth out the window.
Which my schedule for reading this was rather broken just by a lot of other stuff going on. And so one of the nights that I was reading this, it was getting late. It was like 10:30 at night, and I really just needed to go to bed. And Szeth appeared, so like, oh, I can't stop now. But then I got to the end of this chapter 32 where they roll out the window, and I was like, I gotta stop here. I have to go to bed. I have to go to work in the morning. And it was like 3 days before I was able to get back to the next chapter. And so I'm stuck there like 3 days with Kaladin just falling in slow motion out the window while I'm going about my life wondering what's going to happen before I finally got to read the rest of it like 3 days later. That was a lot of suspense. I don't know if I can do that again.
It's definitely designed for you to read chapter 32 and chapter 33 in the same sitting.
Yeah.
You're right. And I was terrified whenever I finished chapter 32 that was just going to be hanging there for like...
Until the next part, yeah.
Part 3 or something. There's just not going to be another like Kaladin or Dalinar, you know. Man. But I was very, very relieved to just have the rest right there, like immediately in chapter 33.
Right.
It jumps right back in and we get to see. And so we get a little bit of conversation. I don't know how much you'd call it a conversation with Szeth and Kaladin, and I was super on edge about that. Yeah, I'm kind of curious to hear what y'all think about that whole ordeal.
I'm really fascinated by this conversation that they have. And in fact, I want to go ahead and read it because it is, again, there's something I'm not quite understanding here, but I feel like this is huge, this moment that we get to see right here. But something I want to mention real quick before we get into that. As they're falling, Kaladin has like run out of Stormlight, right? So he's going to die. They're up high enough to where he's going to be crushed if they hit the ground. But he realizes that Szeth has spheres on him. And so he sucks the light out of Szeth's spheres to power himself up so that he doesn't die when he hits the ground, which is convenient. But I had kind of a side note thought as I was watching this happen in slow motion, in my mind at least. This is an intriguing aspect of like Surgebinder battles, if you think about it. Like I don't know how. I'm curious to see if this is something that's happened a lot in history. If Surge Binders have fought like this a lot, maybe these powers. We're not really sure if these powers are unique to Windrunners or not. So maybe this would have to be like Windrunners fighting amongst themselves or whatnot. But this would seem like a really common and hard to defend against tactic, right? You can't run your opponent out of Stormlight because he's just going to use yours. Like it doesn't matter how much Stormlight you brought, he's standing 5 feet away from you, so he's just gonna breathe in and suck all the light out of your spheres. Like how do you protect against that? Total side note, irrelevant to anything we're going through right now, but my brain went on that bunny trail for a little while.
Windrunner battle strategy.
I guess.
I was thinking, like, what if you just intentionally didn't bring that many spheres, so you use all yours quick, and then
Yeah.
just suck from your opponent?
Or
But also, I think the battle would just go on until neither has Stormlight, and then it's just a normal fist fight.
Right.
Like, yeah.
wouldn't the strategy to be use the other person's first and save yours? And so it's whoever brought less Stormlight has the upper hand.
Yeah. Weird nuances of Surge Binder battles, which, maybe we'll see more of that in the future. Maybe we won't. We'll see. But I did want to read this section of the conversation that Szeth and Kaladin have because, oh man, this could be game changing. So they've fallen off the tower. They sucked in the Stormlight like we saw. They hit the ground. They're not dead. Szeth stands up and says, "What are you?" he demanded. "Same thing you are," Kaladin said. He felt a wave of nausea, but forced himself to appear firm. "Windrunner." "You can't be." Kaladin held up the knife. The few wisps of remaining light streaming from his skin, rain sprinkled him. The assassin scrambled backwards, eyes as wide as if Kaladin had turned into a chasm fiend. "They told me I was a liar," the assassin screamed. "They told me I was wrong. Szeth, Sun Valano, truthless. They named me truthless." And then Kaladin kind of steps forward and threatens him, and he runs off. There's a little bit there where I guess Szeth asks, "Are they back? Are they all back?" And Kaladin just says, yes. He doesn't know what to say or what he's even referring to. But clearly in this moment, Szeth is having a crisis. Szeth is now, I don't have all the pieces here. This is another Brandon Sanderson part where something even bigger than I think is happening in this moment. But Szeth is questioning what it means for him to be truthless. He's trying to figure this out, and somehow the fact that Kaladin has these powers makes him question that, and I don't know why. I can't put that part of it together. Why does the fact that there's another Surge Binder out in the world, does that crush Szeth's reality? Does that break him? Because that's clearly what happens here. Is Szeth is broken. I don't know, Paul. What did you take out of this craziness?
So, what my biggest question, my biggest thought about this is, who's the they? There's always this
Yeah.
mystical person behind Szeth pulling the strings. And we know like who has his oath stone right now. But I'm thinking back to whenever he first became truthless, right? So maybe Szeth initially thought that, there's this awakening and there's lots of search binders that will eventually like pop up. And he's labeled as like a crazy man and labeled truthless or something. That's my thought on this. And so now he's like, no, I was right. This is proof.
Right.
So I'm gonna go do something about it. Was what I was taking from this. And I feel like we're not gonna get an answer to that for a long time. That's my prediction on this. um, but hopefully so. And hopefully we get to see maybe Szeth start to. I still don't know how strong the power of his oath stone is. Is that power that he chooses to respect, Or is it like I have to respect this or I will die or something? Like that's kind of been my big question with Szeth, because every dialogue or thought we've seen from him seems good. Like he doesn't want to hurt anyone, he doesn't want to do anything wrong, but he obviously is doing a lot of bad stuff. Um so I just don't understand the power of that, what's holding him to that. And I feel like this is gonna kind of buckle that power or that pressure, and that's what I'm hoping for at least. So
So far, we've gotten the impression that everything Szeth is doing is not because of his choice, it's because he's truthless. And we don't know why that's happening. We just know that because he's truthless, he has to follow this oath stone. And whoever has the oath stone, that's what he's going to be doing. But now Szeth is, you're right, Eliot, Szeth is questioning, they said I was truthless, and he's questioning that now of, am I really truthless? We don't know what that means, but if he's not, what does that mean for the Oathstone? We have no idea.
Because we even had a moment in Carbranth, right? So we got the big drop at the end of Way of Kings that Taravangian is the one holding Szeth's Oathstone, controlling him. Szeth even had a moment, right, when he goes down into that hospital where they're killing people and trying to get their final last words. And Szeth even thinks for a second, I could stop this. I could kill Taravangian where he's standing right now. I could break my oath and do all this. But just for a brief moment, and then he goes back to following his oath. Like, we know that Szeth potentially might be starting to question a bit of this. This seems to be like the moment where now he's maybe having a whole identity crisis. Does he even know who he is anymore? And I'm again putting together some pieces that don't quite all fit. We don't know why. Why does just the fact that Kaladin exists cause such a dilemma for him? Has he been promised that he has these abilities because he's truthless, or I don't know. The whole picture doesn't quite come together for me now, but I'm wondering what's going to happen to Szeth next. Is he just going to go off and maybe tell himself this was all a vision and it didn't actually happen and come back? Or, like you were hinting at, Paul, is he going to go back to Shinovar and go reconcile with the people who called him truthless, or however that started? What's next for Szeth?
I'll make a prediction.
I'm
Oh
listening.
yeah.
But oh no, high pressure. This
It's not
is
like we're recording this or anything.
Yeah, true. It's just my thoughts, me and my thoughts. This isn't, as a preface, this isn't like really based off of, I don't know, some hint or anything. This is just my guess. Um, with what Szeth has just found out, I think he's going to kind of turn from this. So what we know about Szeth's character, he doesn't want to kill, but whenever he has almost a justification for it, he's much better with it. And I think this is going to be his justification to turn on Taravangian and all the other people who've wronged him, all his previous people. So I think he's going to start to like hunt them down. And he's gonna kind of go off the rails with this because of, I don't know, maybe the things he's been forced to do over the years, the way he's been mistreated and things like that. So I think he's gonna go back and basically just assassinate Taravangian and kind of go back through his history there. I feel like that's a little, I don't know. I want to say that's honestly a basic prediction because I feel like there's a lot more deep stuff behind it than that.
Nothing wrong with basic predictions.
But yeah, that's what I'm That's what I think is going to happen. I think he's at least going to turn on Taravangian. I don't know so much further than that.
I I think I might throw a prediction into the hat here, and go a similar but slightly different direction from you, Paul. I'm thinking back to the Wander Sail chapter and the
I
story
was going to
we
bring this
got
up if you didn't.
of. Uh, I'm glad you say that. The story we got of Darethil, is that the name of the guy?
Darethil, yep.
Who go who goes to that island, finds the people. They're freaky. They kill people for dropping a vase. They learn that the king who told them to do that kind of stuff was dead. They were doing stuff that they weren't actually should have been forced to do. And so all the deaths that they did were actually on their own heads. If what we're thinking about Szeth is correct, I think Szeth is going to find himself in that scenario where Szeth suddenly realizes, oh crap, all those people I killed wrongly. I should not have done that. They're now, he's kind of justified all this before of he feels guilty. We had that scene, I think, at some point where he fully he thinks he's guilty for all this, but he thinks he has to do them. If he suddenly realizes I think that's just going to crush him. I think he's going to go either completely insane. It's just going to break him completely, or maybe even like cause him to take his own life or something like that. I don't think he's going to be able to handle it. I don't think he'll be able to handle and like the people that Darethil saw on that island, they're just going to go mad because he's going to realize all those people I murdered, I didn't have to.
Yeah,
That's a really good prediction.
if he's suddenly not truthless, whose fault was the killings? If he didn't have to follow the Oath Stone, what was stopping him from killing Teravangian in Carbronth?
Right. But all that being said, we're making a little bit of a logical jump here. We don't have all the pieces. We don't even know really what truthless means. Like, we don't know how Szeth became truthless. We don't know what he did. You know, he says here that they called me a liar. They named me truthless. What did he say? What did he do that they decided, oh, you're a liar, you're truthless, you're now given this terrible sentence of being truthless and having to do all this? That there's still part of the story we're missing. So I'm willing to admit that maybe we're missing a little something and going a bit in the wrong direction, but I'm seeing some parallels here, and I think that might be where Szeth is headed.
I want to bring up a couple more parallels, and let's talk about differences as well between Kaladin and Szeth specifically. And Syl actually fills Kaladin in on this a decent amount in these chapters. Syl specifically says Szeth doesn't have a spren. Yeah. And as far as we know, in order to surge bind, you need a spren. Now what?
So, and just to build that up a little further, sorry, Paul, I'm running over you here, but like to the point where we saw Syl cut off Kaladin's powers at one point, right? Kaladin was he fighting with Adolin?
Yeah, dueling with Adolin.
When that happened? Yep. Yeah, he's going after Adolin and Syl like pulls the plug, you know, and says, "Oh, well, you weren't protecting someone, so you don't get your powers anymore." So that right there, again, backs up what you're saying there, Trevor. That as far as we know, you have to have a spren who's feeding you these abilities in order to do this surge binding. So for Szeth not to have one is pretty crazy.
That's true. And so with that, my first thought was like, what else is there? Like, what could be giving him these powers? But very positive that later on Syl says like, no, like, not exactly paraphrasing, but like no real spren would do that. Like no honorable spren. So I'm assuming, you know, we know about the honor spren and the cryptics. I'm guessing that this is some kind of whatever these red lightning spren are, perhaps, or maybe similar. Some kind of evil spren. Maybe that's with Szeth. Or just some kind of spren that's not liked by the others. I would guess. Yeah, but I still think he has a spren of sorts. Unless it has something to do with that dark sphere. Maybe.
Ooh.
But
You know what you just made me think of?
What?
You made me think of Legend of Zelda when you trap fairies in bottles. He trapped his spren in a sphere and buried it somewhere and isn't listening to it.
Yeah. Fair. Could be. So maybe his spren is named Navi or
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
so this takes me back to the kind of original question: is Szeth a windrunner? And Kaladin even kind of says this. He's like, "Oh, I'm a windrunner like you, clearly." But is he? Like, I don't know if this is. I honestly can't decide if this is evidence for Szeth being a windrunner or evidence for Szeth not being a windrunner, because I can kind of see it either way, right? Where he's using the same powers. They even talk about being a windrunner, but then he doesn't have a spren, or if he does, it's some crazy kind of different spren that Syl doesn't really know about. I don't know if I'm any closer to an answer on whether he is a windrunner.
I agree. This didn't change my stand. I still think that Szeth is not a windrunner. I think he just simply knew what a windrunner was. So Kaladin says, "I'm a windrunner," or whatever he says, like you're a windrunner too. And Szeth knows that, and he's not going to be like, "Actually, I'm not a windrunner." Like,
Technically.
yeah. But he knows what that means, and that's probably like enough for him. Is my guess.
I think based on one of the things Syl says in here, I'm kind of leaning more towards thinking of Szeth as kind of an anomaly. Like he's kind of a windrunner, but he's kind of not. I think if he was a windrunner, he'd have to have an honor spren, which he seems pretty clearly he does not. But then he doesn't seem to have a spren of any kind. And Syl even says towards the end of chapter 33, when Syl and Kaladin are kind of dissecting, Syl says that his shard blade was different somehow, that it was strange. And Kaladin's like, "What do you mean it was a shard blade? It did what shard blades do." And I even think he has a funny thing where he's like, "Oh, it's just an ordinary shard blade, if shard blades can be ordinary." And Syl says, "No, it was different." Syl knows somehow that it was functioning somehow differently than a normal shard blade would. And so maybe that plays into this whole thing of maybe he's somehow like getting his abilities from his shard blade instead of like a spren or something like that.
Does she mention the amount of Stormlight Szeth uses?
Yes, she does. She says it has to do somehow with the amount of Stormlight that he's. So
He mentions that I think he doesn't have to use as much too. I could be wrong.
No,
Maybe
it's the other direction. It's saying that he's overloading with Stormlight. He's using a lot.
and that got me thinking a little bit of like, okay, what have we seen that's a different version of this? And I thought back to the Parshendi. Remember back when Kaladin first revealed his abilities to the Parshendi, someone makes a comment in the Parshendi world of, well, maybe he was just using an honor blade, or maybe he was just an honor blade. The kind of the implication there being, oh, an honor blade is another version of doing that stuff. But they're like, oh no, he's clearly a surge binder, whatever it was. Is maybe Szeth the honor blade? Is maybe Szeth the different version? We don't have any details of what honor blade even means or is or was. We just know it's Kaladin was perhaps mistaken for one. Is Szeth the real version of whatever honor blade is? Question
I'm
mark.
glad you mentioned that. That's what I was about to bring up because as of right now, that's the only different category we have that
Right,
could
exactly.
be. The reason I think it might not be that is because I feel like they say it so kind of loosely, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like almost like that's better than being a surge binder. Like, oh, like he probably just don't worry about it. Like it's probably just an honor blade. Like,
Yeah,
no
that's
big
true.
deal. And so that's the reason I feel like it's not because Szeth seems
like the super powered version of Kaladin,
Yeah,
as opposed to
yes.
the not quite as dangerous.
As opposed to the off-brand or something.
Yeah, good point.
But yes, I do kind of agree. Like I agree with that. And right now, that's I feel like the best explanation we might have. But mostly just for those extra details, like the shard blade seeming different, and things like that.
Good thoughts. Good thoughts. I hate to push us, but we are running long, so we need to talk about chapter 34 at some point because there's a lot to talk about in chapter 34 as well.
Shard blades.
This is just the first reveal of two massive reveals in this section.
There are a couple minor things that I'll come back to chapter 33. One has to do with Adolin, but I will push us towards chapter 34. Shallan and Tin have an interesting span read conversation with
Could say that.
with Tin's informant. Do either of you guys want to talk about this?
Well, not much to say. It was a normal conversation, and I think we could just leave it at that.
That's fair.
Nothing notable. So
I pictured this scene as like the showdown in the Wild West scene, where like the span read is reading, and then it writes out the sentences that kind of reveal who each other is, and they just slowly look at each other and like realizing, and then like there's that brief moment where nobody moves, and then they both like
they
both
both go for the draw
at the same time, like try and draw or tackle the other person or whatever. That little brief moment of you, and then they fight.
I thought of Trevor, we need to add it to the video. I thought of the Spider-Man meme. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where they're both pointing at each other.
Both the spiders.
So, like,
they're both pointing.
Yeah, not that they're like the same, but that like you know.
Yep.
That's what I was thinking of, and that was insane. I was just on edge and excited straight through all these chapters. And this was definitely like the cherry on top, though, because we see Shallan like actually fight someone, which is kind of fun. And I was also glad that if she's gonna fight someone, it was Tin. Just we talked about this a little before. Just not a big Tin fan. She's not the worst. Just like kind of annoying almost, and so I was definitely okay with it.
She's not annoying anymore. Don't worry.
True. True. Rest in peace still. But
so just like the other big reveal we just got with Szeth, this one with her drawing the Shardblade caught me again completely off guard, because I thought, okay, we just had our massive climax of part 2. We're just going to get a boring little Shallan chapter to wrap up this, part 2, a little, coast into the end of this. Oh no, we get the Shardblade we've been waiting for a while now. I mean, we realized that Shallan had a Shardblade quite a ways back, like halfway through Way of Kings or something like that. Yep. And so we've been waiting for this, and we've been theorizing what we think is going to be the moment that's going to force her to draw that blade. And here it is, right here. She hasn't even made it to the Shattered Plains yet, and she has to draw this blade to defend herself. This was completely unexpected.
Paul,
true.
You said earlier that you thought when Shallan would finally draw her blade would be a emotion, like there would be an emotion provocation for Shallan. And what she immediately says after killing Tin is she's angry at her for thinking she's naive. She's like, Tin is accusing her of being naive and how she needs to learn her lesson. And Tin's like, I guess I have to teach you this lesson, and is going to go kill her. And then Shallan, side note, summons her blade through Tin. Like, she summons her blade and it appears through her. That is so cool. Anyway, um, and
I think that's very fitting.
she kills Tin, and then immediately after that she says, "I told you, I already learned that lesson. I'm not naive." She's angry at Tin for thinking she's not. I enjoyed it.
Like, listen here, okay?
Yeah.
I feel like, in all honesty, in this context, shard blades are. We know shard blades are like overpowered, right? Like they're incredibly strong, but in this, like you said, like Shallan is kind of she's getting beat up or about to, and she just kind of holds her hands there and summons it, and then it's fight's over.
Yeah.
Like, and that's all she had to do, which is really cool, I will say. But yeah, I'm super glad that this happened. Just because we've kind of been waiting for it. It wasn't exactly how I expected, but I did expect it to be something where she or someone else is like physically like about to die, right? Unless this happens. So yeah, that happens,
Yeah,
and then everyone else walks in and stuff, and
Everyone else does walk
whole
in,
deal.
and I want to talk about this for a second because back to 33, what I was going to mention about Adolin. Adolin notices Kaladin in the fight. He notices a couple specific things that are fishy. He thinks, you just fell 150 feet and you're fine. And you also have a sleeve missing. And I'm pretty, like, I was hanging upside down at the time, but I'm pretty sure I saw him cut your arm off. And Adolin thinks to himself after Kaladin leaves, like, was this a setup? Is Kaladin on the edit? And he's like, no. Let's not think about that. I'll be as paranoid as Elokar. But and then Shallan's deserter hired guys walk in on her with Tin on the ground, and she has a shard blade in her hands. People are going to start talking. Like, people are noticing that stuff's happening, and stuff's going to change.
You think so? I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. No, I'm kidding. I I didn't know how to feel about that because I almost wanted it to just be like she has to try and cover this up somehow, but everyone walks in, and so there's no covering that up.
Right.
I will say that for what's that guy's name? Vatha?
Vatha. Yep.
Vatha, yeah. For Vatha and his men, I've kind of been worried up to this point about their loyalty, right? We're always kind of worried, are they going to actually follow Shallan? I'm not worried about that anymore. They're going to obey Shallan no matter what she tells them for the rest of eternity. So there's a lot of uncertainty here. I think word's going to get out. This is going to be interesting, but they're going to be very obedient to Shallan for the rest of this time, I think.
I also just thought about this. Once they roll up more into the Shattered Plains, I guess, is Kaladin gonna be like, so what happened to the other person with you?
Oh yeah.
Right.
They just had to leave. So but yeah. I think you're right though with Vatha and them. Like, everyone walks in, right? Like Gaz and everyone, I think, walk in, and she's holding her shard blade, and they're just kind of like, oh, all right. Like, I guess that's cool.
So that's how it is.
Yeah. But yeah, that's definitely not gonna stay a locked away secret any longer. And I'm curious to see how that goes. Kind of, I feel like my thought right now is that it's not actually that major, even though it's humongous. Like her having a shard blade, but
Before we move on from this scene, I want to talk about pattern for a second. because Pattern kind of comes in clutch here. He impersonates Yasna, first of all, which makes Tin spin around and drop Shallan in the chokehold that she has her in, and lets Shallan summon her Shardblade. But he also creates a lot of yelling and screaming for Vatha and Gaz and their men to fight Tin's men. There's a whole like battle scene that happens off camera, and it's started by Pattern. Pattern makes a lot of like ambient noises, if you will, which sparks a fight between the two of them. There's a lot of growth that Pattern's come on since the beginning of this book, that he's able to, what's the word I'm looking for?
He's able to understand what's going on and know that he needs to act.
Right.
That he needs to
improvise.
He doesn't need Shallan
that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, he figures out that, hey, I need to save her now, and instead of Shallan having to tell him what to do, he does it.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. The Pattern we first saw, who was like bumping into the bedpost over and over and over, this is not the same Pattern that we've seen. He's definitely come a long way in the month or 2 or 3 that we've since we first met him.
We end 36 with Shallan taking kind of an aggressive stance with the Ghostbloods. She figures out that Tin's part of the Ghostbloods, kills Tin, and then steals her span reed and arranges a meeting with the Ghostbloods.
Bold move.
Yeah.
I'm wondering too, is she going to need to now impersonate Tin in order to complete this meeting? Are these going to be like different Ghostbloods than Tin's ever met before, or are these like direct contacts that Tin has had within the Ghostbloods? Is she going to be able to pull this off? Is she going to try and pull this off, or is she just going to like set something up and then get someone else in on, hey, I know where the Ghostbloods are, let's go get them, kind of thing? I'm curious where Shallan's going to think she can go with this, and whether she's going to, maybe in classic Shallan style, maybe bite off more than she can chew. Maybe she tries to take this on her own when maybe she should bring in someone else to help her. Well, I imagine this is going to be a pretty major plot point going forward, is her interactions with the Ghostbloods and figuring out what they know, how involved in the Shattered Plains are they, what are they in control of, all of that. It's my guess.
This is clear to me, and this is how I see it, but it's not clear to you guys. So I put Words of Radiance. This was in our Rhythm of War episode, but you guys didn't watch that, obviously. But each of the 4 of us in that episode ranked where we put Rhythm of War and all the other books, and I put Words of Radiance last in the 4. But it's only really because, to me, as a rereader, Words of Radiance is pretty slow for the first 2 parts. I'm not you guys are figuring out a lot of new stuff for the first time around. It doesn't have a lot of reread value for me because not much happens in the first 2 parts. But this is really where Words of Radiance really starts, and I'm really excited for you guys to read from this point on. We've got a lot of good content coming up really quick, and I'm really excited for you guys to get to it.
Nice. I am excited.
So you're saying the Sanderlanche has come early in this book?
I'm not saying that. Yeah, I didn't say that. For the record, I did not say that.
You kind of did, but
no, I did not. I did not say that.
You did. Sure.
I'm excited. I'm excited for what comes next.
Did we finally get a spoiler out of?
Did
Trevor?
we worm something out of him? Yeah. Maybe.
No.
Sure. Okay.
All right.
Whenever Kaladin dies next chapter, I'll I'll remind
All
you
right.
if it. You said nothing else happened.
If
so.
I will grant you this, if Kaladin dies next chapter, you can tell me I told you so. Okay. You can hold me to that.
2 chapters. I get 2 chapters.
No,
for
you said
this.
1. Okay.
1.5.
The end
Okay.
of part 2 is upon us. Elliot, I know you like to summarize the end of parts, so I'll toss it over to you before we close out this episode.
Definitely. So yes, in classic style, I do a little retrospective every time we hit the end of a part and try and think back on, okay, where have our characters been? What have we learned? What's my takeaway as a reader from this part? And I feel like I've said this a bunch of times in a row now, but I think it honestly is getting more and more challenging. I had to think about this one for a while, and some of the ones in Way of Kings were pretty obvious, leadership and honor and things like that that came really, really quickly. These Words of Radiance ones are making me think a little more. I'm having to dive a little deeper, and I think I think it's the fact that Kaladin and Shallan are on very different journeys, and kind of tying the two of them together is becoming more and more difficult. But ultimately, where I ended up for the theme of part 2 of Words of Radiance was that the word I picked was expectation. And I mean that in the sense of like belief or kind of inspiration. We've talked about that kind of before, but using the word expectation allows me to tie it into a couple different things. And Shallan obviously is the biggest part of that. It's her book. We're seeing the most of more of her than a lot of other folks, and she goes through this very interesting journey here in this section where she inspires these men, these deserters, to become more than they were. They were just kind of mercenaries or bandits out on the plains, and she inspires them to come and save her group and to protect her and to stand up and do something a little more honorable. And she has a couple instances, like with Bluth, where she just kind of sets this expectation up for him of, I see you as a hero, and he goes in, he becomes a hero, and that's a really interesting bit there. On the flip side of that, we see her whole interaction with Tin and with Shallan. And Tin expects Shallan to be a con woman. She kind of makes the assumption right off the bat that, oh, well, clearly you are a con woman already, so I'll take you under my wing. We'll learn. And she kind of gets her on this whole expectation of becoming a fully fledged con woman, and it turns out to not be the case. We can kind of see Shallan's journey on the inside. She's lying, but not lying, but sort of lying, but kind of not at the same time, and it's very, very confusing. There's also this whole time this kind of looming expectation that we have of readers of Shallan is she going to continue Yasna's legacy? Is she gonna, in part 1 we lost Yasna, is Shallan gonna take up that mantle and go hunt down Urithiru and solve the riddle? That's not been answered here, but it's still kind of hanging out there. So lots of just kind of expectations, if you will, on the Shallan story. Over in the Kaladin side, we get a couple instances with Kaladin and Syl dealing with the expectation that Kaladin is going to betray and murder Syl. And we talked about that this episode. Or was it last? It's all blurring together for me now. With his discussion with the Stormfather. That was this one, yeah. And just the kind of what is going to happen next for Kaladin and all of that. Will he betray Syl? Will he kill her? Will he not? Will he figure out a way out of that? We don't know yet. And then ultimately, I can tie expectation into kind of our experience as readers. We've had some big expectations that all get fulfilled here at the end of this part 2 in this episode we just talked about. We've been waiting to see Shallan's Shardblade. We've been waiting to see a Szeth and Kaladin showdown. We've been waiting to see Kaladin and Shallan meeting, and we got all of that. We got all of that here in this chapter, which was a little crazy. I was very surprised that my expectations were met here, but maybe not quite in the way that I expected my expectations to be met. Lastly, to tie it all together, I'm talking for too long here, as I usually do. You gave me a soapbox, so I'm standing on it for too long. Szeth. To tie this all together with Szeth. Szeth has had his own beliefs and his own expectations of who he is, what he's about, why he does what he does. did all of that just get completely shattered and broken and turned upside down? Is he going to have to reevaluate his entire existence? Has he completely broken all of his expectations for himself and his entire life? To be answered, I think. Not for sure, but that's where we're thinking, as we talked about. So that's my look back at part 2 here of Words of Radiance. Maybe not quite as coherent as some of my other ones, but that was where I got to throughout this the chapters in this section.
Your turn, Paul. I'm just kidding. You can chip in if you want.
Yeah, I actually do have a few words. I agree with what Elliot said.
Great. All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving forward, I'll leave us with this. Moving forward, any predictions? We've just had a lot dumped on our plate. What are we doing moving forward? In the first part, we lost Yasna. In the second part, we lost Tin. Who we losing in the third part?
Kaladin in the first chapter.
I forgot about that. Sorry.
Said this. Yeah. Unironically, I think I'm gonna go really bold. This is pretty bold. I'm gonna say that we are going to lose Syl because of the dream thing with Kaladin here.
I thought you were gonna double down.
I
thought you were gonna double down on your Adolin dying in a duel.
That's probably way more realistic one. That could very well happen. But I'm gonna go with Syl because it'd be really major, and I don't know what would happen afterwards. But yeah, go big or go home.
Yeah.
I think we might lose Elokar. I don't honestly know how. I don't honestly know why, but I think Szeth might be involved there. I think Szeth might be completely broken and go on some kind of wild rampage, and I think maybe Elokar might be a casualty of that.
One thing I just thought of, doesn't Dalinar tell Szeth, like, I won't let you take him from me? Like,
yep.
So that's the only reason I have to believe that would happen. Without that, I would be like, nah, like Elokar's. No, Szeth doesn't actually care about him, But
all right,
who do you think will die next part, Trevor? Just your most educated guess.
Yeah, really trying to think here. Rock. I think Rock's gonna die.
Rock. Okay.
Oh, not Rock.
Yeah, that would be sad.
So you asked what I think, and that's what I think. So,
okay, I believe you.
All right. Anyway, with that,
we'll see how well these age.
We can wrap up this episode of Following Note On. This is episode 32. We have interludes next week, and we are into part 3 after that. So, thanks for joining me so far, and we've got quite a bit of Words Radiance still to go. So, let's get to it.
Oh, yeah.
May the journey continue.